We have to remember that things can be different and different can be good.
Right.
So you'll see pictures, by the way, now of people walking down the street on their phones or on the subway on their phones, and everyone's like, "Oh, why?" It's so appalling. Everyone's so atomized in their own individual experience. Well, you look at pictures of the subway and commuter trains in the 1950s, and everyone's reading their newspaper. They're not talking to each other. It's like the drinking car. They're all in their individual world then too.
Yeah.
And actually, I never mind when I see someone walking down the street on the phone because they're not alone. They're communicating with someone they want to be connected to. They're making a personal connection. It's virtual. It's on the phone, but they're not alone. That's a positive thing. So I find that some of it's generational in terms of how comfortable one is with screens or not with screens, and that kind of dynamic. But also the idea that in the 21st century, young people are not just content consumers. They also want to be content creators. They don't just want to listen to music, they want to make music. They don't just want to listen to videos, they want to make videos. And the technology makes it easy enough to do that and put it online and maybe make you a viral sensation, an influencer, all these things we hear about. But it's not a passive thing anymore. I heard an interview with David Bowie in 1999 where he started talking about this, how the internet's going to totally change everything. And the interviewer says, "What do you mean? It's just a medium. It's just a way to get the word out, like a new radio." And he said, "No, it's not. It's going to be very different because of that interactivity, because of the creativity it allows, the sampling, the repurposing, the memeing, all that stuff. It's going to be very different." And we didn't really appreciate it at the time. But that's what it means now in terms of doing Jewish. You can't just package something and say, "Here, read this book." You need to create this experience. You need to do this thing. You need to have a place for comments. Because people who read articles online have a place to add their comments or post something on Facebook. They add a comment, they have a dialogue. And that's actually, there's a great book from the 90s called The Talmud and the Internet, which imagines how much the Talmud is actually like the Internet. It's a nice short book, about 110 pages. Jonathan Rosen is the author. But he says it's like a hyperlinked text, because you're jumping from here to there and quoting sources, and there's commentary from all, on a news article, you could be reading comments from 1997, and then you add a comment in. And that's just like how the Talmud works with these multi-generational commentaries. There's a difference between articulating what works for you and setting a normative expectation for everybody.
Right.
But even leaders are allowed to have their preference.
Of course, as long as in a group like this,
Yeah, I know. Right,
that's
I know.
not pushed on other people.
But this is the balancing act when you're in a leadership role in an egalitarian community.
Right.
So I can give recommendations, but I can also support people in pursuing their own choice. And when it comes time to create a ceremony for the community, I have to decide, do I do it electronically? Do we blow a trumpet or do we blow a shofar?
Right.
Okay? Trumpet's modern, easier on the mouth, but shofar is traditional and has an evocative, intentional anachronism to it. It's valuable. Just like lighting candles for some people, using the fire is really evocative for them. And the last thing I was going to say, and then I'll jump over to you. The virtual world that many people live in is not real. Because people distinguish of, I know somebody online versus I know them in real life. But for people who connect to other people online, that's a real connection. Those can be real friends to them. They're not like made up people. They're actually on the other end of the line. And people thought that the movies would kill live theater. Guess what? There are 300 different theater companies in Chicago right now, of varying success levels. But live theater is still happening. In Los Angeles, of all places, live theater happens. Because for some people, going in person is valuable. Going to a sporting event in person is different from watching it on TV or seeing it on the internet. So when I've had people sometimes contact me about listening to podcasts or putting up video of programs or so on, I've sometimes said to them, when I was thinking in 20th century language, we don't necessarily want to give it all away online because, we want people to actually show up. I don't want to lead a Shabbat service with me and a video camera. I'd like people in the room. And she said, well, if I didn't live in Kansas, of course I'd be coming to something, but sometimes you're not where you want to be in the way you want to do it. And so the virtual is not going to replace the in-person physical, but it can supplement, it can complement, it can be parallel to. And everyone's having it available as an option is a positive. whatever choice people choose to make out of it. You know, one of the other shifts
Thank you
that
for
is the core idea of this afternoon is this concept of doing Jewish. Because if it's about creating experiences and instead of top-down presenting information or mandating identity, this is one of the reasons why Chabad has been very successful. They create what are called low-barrier, public space Jewish experiences. You don't have to make someone come to your building. They don't have to put any money down to get at the door. It's not pay to pray, which is the classical model. You show up in a mall, and someone comes up to you and says, here's a Jewish experience. Would you like to try this out? Put on tefillin, shake a lulav, whatever it might be. And so it's very low, it's no cost, it's low barrier. They'll teach you exactly what to say, so you don't have to remember anything, you don't have to read any Hebrew. They've lowered all the barriers to creating a Jewish experience. And people connect to that lived experience of doing something physically and being told, good job, you did something good. This is important. Now, Chabad also comes from a mystical, Kabbalah perspective that if all Jews did all these things, then the Mashiach would come. And so they have their agenda, of course, and they wind up getting a lot of money from secular Jews who support the kind of work they're doing, even if they don't agree with their values in other areas. But the reality is that they've created these low-barrier public space experiences. And for a while, I was a partner with a group called the Jewish Outreach Institute, which was based in New York, and tried to teach liberal Jewish communities how to do exactly the same thing. How to lower the barriers and how to create easy public space Jewish experiences. So we've, for many years now, done a program at our local farmers market in August or September, where we do an apples and honey tasting. So we have 3 or 4 different flavors of honey, and then you can try it on a piece of apple, and then you ask someone, have you ever had apples and honey before? It's less rude than saying, are you Jewish? But 95% of the time you say that to someone who's Jewish, they say, sure, for Rosh Hashanah, and then you've passed the code word, back and forth. But that's, again, a low-cost, low-barrier Jewish experience. And for non-Jewish people who try it out, you have a banner saying this is a Jewish congregation, and so they know it's a Jewish community offering this. And then you say to them while they're chewing, Jews like to eat apples and honey on the Jewish New Year for a sweet New Year. And so they learn a little bit about Jewish life and have a Jewish experience, whether or not they're Jewish. Again, we're not asking, are you Jewish, before we offer people an apple and some honey, because who knows what they look like, and who knows, what they're going to dress like, and what their partner looks like. You can't judge it by the covers alone anymore. So this creating of Jewish experience and doing Jewish in the broader world, I think, is more appropriate for that 21st century model where barriers are fluid and you can't always tell what Jews look like or what they dress like or what they act like. So people will do a Passover activity in the matzah aisle at the supermarket because they figure that's where the Jews who never do anything else anywhere, they're going to go buy matzah during Passover season. So you stake out a spot and you have an activity for the kids, or you've got a colored Jewish calendar or something. It could be make your own Seder plate or design, whatever you want to do. We've done programs at Jewish culture festivals, which is more of a destination. People come to that on purpose, they don't stumble across it, on making your own mezuzah. So here's where the mezuzah comes from, here's a thing you can use to design it, here's a humanistic version of a text you could put in it if you like that. The Society for Humanistic Judaism, our national group,
And I have it
has that.
online if you need it.
So is there an end goal to doing that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, exactly. What's the goal, right? Well, there's a number of goals. One is, on an organizational level, sometimes you try to capture their information so you can follow up with them. That's part of marketing, that's how it works. So the other thing we do for the apples and honey tasting is we have a raisin challah that's round, and you have to guess the number of raisins in the challah. We cut a little cross section so they can see the inside and get a sense of how dense it is, and then they fill out a card to guess, but of course we need their contact information in case they win a $25 gift card to a deli or something like that. So then we follow up with them, and we ask them to check, are you interested in food events? Do you like family program? What do you want to do? In a very short form, just their name, email, phone, that's it. And we follow up with them. And 80 to 90% of the time, that's it. I let them know they didn't win, and I never hear from them again. Maybe I see them at the farmer's market the next year. That's fine. They had a Jewish experience. In many cases, they're already part of a Jewish community, but it's one more touch. It's one more positive Jewish memory. And it's a mitzvah, right? But the other 15% of the time, someone says, "Oh, this was." They take some literature for your table, and again, I always have multiple sizes of literature. I'll have like a postcard size. I'll have a business card size if they don't want something that big. I'll have a brochure if they want to read something. I don't dump everything on them all at once. You know, here's something to start with. Go online, read some more. You want to get our newsletter, they can check a box on the form that says, yes, send me your newsletter. Or they don't have to, they can leave it blank. It's really sort of lowering the barrier for them, but again, making that connection, and hopefully they come to visit a Shabbat service, they read our newsletter, they see we're doing a soup tasting program coming up. We did a make your own challah workshop that was really well subscribed. So there's all kinds of follow-ups you can do, especially for foodies who are coming to farmers markets. You target it in the foodie direction.
Do you have a brick and mortar?
No, we rent space. We rent space. So this is sort of the institutional agenda, why we spend time and energy on doing it. But for the broader Jewish community, creating those low barrier, low cost, positive Jewish experiences, ideally, will get people coming back for more of those kind of things. I mean, Birthright Israel has really changed people's expectations, because Birthright Israel is largely free. It's not 100% free, but it's mostly free, and it's a low barrier. They don't expect any literacy or knowledge at all coming in. You can have only one Jewish parent can go on birthright trips, and they've extended the age range for it. There's a follow-up program called Honeymoon Israel now for people who are recently married within the first 5 years of them being married. They also get a very strongly subsidized trip to Israel. And so all of these programs are lowering those cost barriers and lowering the literacy barriers and lowering the knowledge and the pre-qualification barriers, so that when they do come to a Jewish community or a synagogue, they're looking for the same kind of experience. Come as you are, come wearing what you want to wear, come being who you are and what you know. And they want these low barrier Jewish experiences. Now sometimes you come in and you see someone reading from a Torah scroll, and you want to learn how to do that. Well, that's not a no barrier. You have to learn something. You have to take a class. You have to study that particular portion. It takes time and energy. But that's aspirational. That's something you've built up to. Another example, parallel to this, my congregation shifted how we understand people exploring membership. It used to be someone would show up at your congregation and you say, "Oh, are you interested in membership?" You have to think of it like dating. If you went on a first date with somebody and you said, "Oh, are you interested in a commitment?" They might run away, fast. But if you say, "Oh, would you like to get to know each other more?" "Oh, this was fun. We should do this again sometime." Then you build trust, you build a relationship, and then they might think about a commitment. So it's the opposite. You get to know each other first, and then that builds to a connection, as opposed to the old model was join, and now let's get to know each other. It's going to be very different. So the same is true with this doing Jewish stuff. You do one thing, you get a taste for it, maybe you come back and do something else. You come to a hamantash making workshop, that was fun. Now let's do a matzah making thing. Then it's Shavuot, here's how you make dairy blintzes, and you could just do a whole food sequence all the way through the year and build people up there. Yeah.
But how do you make it known to the community involved?
There's lots of ways to do it. You can do the conventional advertising, put signs out, stuff. Again, this kind of program is a destination thing. People had to know that you had to come to the Carlsbad Library. It's very unlikely anybody came to the Carlsbad Library, saw the sign and said, "Oh, I've got a free 3 hours," and just walks in. It's unlikely to happen. Like a Hanukkah lighting in the mall, that's more of a stumble upon the thing. So some of it is you do it in a public space so people see it, and even if people didn't come in here, they might have seen the sign and said, "Oh, that sounds interesting," so they take a picture with their phone and they look it up later. But that's the thing, with social media, you make the experience worth noting. So here's a picture of me making a challah covered in flour. And so then that becomes a memory that gets shared more broadly. And again, you have to change the focus of who's the beneficiary here. It's tough to think about it this way, but when I'm doing those apple tastings, there's an impulse in me to say, if someone says, oh, I'm a member of a congregation, we're very happy there, is to take the apple back and not, you know, because from the marketing side, that's not helping me at all. But that's not a positive Jewish experience. It's like when you visit a synagogue and someone says, you're in my seat. You know, that happens.
Oh my gosh.
Whether it's the seat they always sit in, or it's the seat they donated for and their name is on it. You know, that happens too. But that's the opposite of it. When you're doing these kind of public space events, these Jewish experiences, it's for their benefit. It's for their positive experience. So I'm not thinking about always what's best for me. It's what's best for them and theirs.
But
So,
is that law already over?
well, look, positive goodwill comes back to you who knows how, and word of mouth and
I mean, aren't you doing it as basically a marketing?
It is a marketing effort. I mean, we have our banner, people see us, we have congregational literature there. We give out a lot more apple pieces than we give out brochures. Because a lot of people just want an apple piece, they don't want a brochure, they don't want it. We're hitting the minority, you know, that 15% who do want to find out more about you, who are intrigued by what you're doing. When we're doing these public space events, this is just one example of the Doing Jewish model. And that can apply to coming into a synagogue setting. You know, who gets to read in a service? Is it only Jews that get to participate on the Bima? In some communities that's the case. Or do you open it to anybody who wants to participate? Can they do a reading as long as they're competent to do it, you know, in a competent way? Do you allow them in and don't ask questions about who is what? That's part of the new model of many of these creative new emerging Jewish communities is come and have Jewish experience. Let's study Torah together. And I don't care what you know, and I don't care what you can do. We'll create this Jewish experience, and maybe you'll find it valuable. I mean, there are a lot of these liberal Jewish synagogues. There's a place in in D.C. called Sixth and I, which is a new model of the Jewish synagogue / community center programming. And the rabbi there was on a podcast called Judaism Unbound, talking about her conversion program. They have a waiting list for their conversion program at the synagogue because so many people have come to their space and had Jewish experiences and said, this is who I want to be, this is what I want to do. They want to dive in deeper. But they started with the doing Jewish, not with the who are you and the identity stuff. He created the positive experiences and people said, oh, if that's what Jewish is, then I want more of that. And people are doing this all the time. I mean, I have written in my notes, I didn't say it just for you, they go to yoga classes without the theology, they're just there for the experience, or for the exercise, or for the quiet, or whatever their particular seeking is. They go to ethnic music concerts. You know, my half-sister is part Polish and part Syrian Jewish, but she's very much into Balkan music. And her parents did Balkan folk dancing for a long time. And no one's checking her papers at the door, the Balkan Music Festival. She's able to go and experience it. So we're already experiencing all these cultures. I had sushi for lunch. Right? I lived the multicultural dream. Got to eat what I wanted to. So this is the world now, and people are going to find Jewish experiences and Jewish food in creative and new ways. Look, what percent of the people who go to these new creative Jewish restaurants, Zahab in Philadelphia, or these really cutting edge culinary things, what percent of them are Jewish? Probably some, and for them it's a Jewish experience. And for others, it may or may not be a Jewish experience, but they're experiencing something that came out of Jewish culture. I remember Ken Burns' baseball documentary, which came out maybe 20 years ago, still is very good. But there was one interview that really struck me, where the baseball fan said, if you're trying to ask what's the best era in baseball, it has to be now. Because now everybody can participate in the global game, where in the 1930s, it was racially segregated, and you couldn't, how could you call that the best era? And so I think the same is true for Jewish life now. Jewish life today is the best it's ever been, because first of all, women are fully able to participate, even in modern Orthodox settings. They're getting clergy training and teaching classes, and it's drawing on the full creativity of the Jewish people, and we're freer than we've ever been to create new forms and new ways to celebrate. There's more online resources that have ever been there, which is again, low barrier, low cost, chance to explore all kinds of perspectives. There are, when I was growing up in Detroit, there were 4 flavors of bagels. Plain, raisin, egg, and salt. That was it. And you picked your flavor and that was it. That was all the options you had. Just like, at one time there was Reform, Conservative, Orthodox Judaism, and that was it. Maybe there were some secular alternatives and maybe you heard of this Reconstructionist thing, but by and large, just a few choices. Vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, that was it. Nowadays, you go into a bagel shop, and you've got Asiago cheese and chocolate chip and blueberry, and you get some people that go in there and complain, well, that's not really a bagel, blueberry bagel or whatever. Just like they'll talk about Judaism and say, well, that's not really a Judaism, the way you're doing it differently. But my perspective is the more flavors of bagels there are, the more people can find a bagel that suits their taste, that works for them. And the more styles of Judaism there are, the more you can find a flavor that's the best fit for you. And then you can use that as a springboard for whatever you want to put on your bagel. And it doesn't have to be cream cheese. And you keep coming back because it tastes good. And you can't argue about taste. If it's different bagel flavors, instead of a hierarchy of best to worst or most to least, then it's a different dynamic.
Judgment lines.
Okay, so my question is, with that analogy, if it's many flavors of bagel, it's still a bagel. So what is?
Is a bagel dog a bagel?
So what is the core of Judaism that makes it still the Jewish thing? What's that?
Well, to beat this analogy to death,
Yeah.
the empty of the middle of the bagel, the core of the bagel is empty.
Right.
You put whatever you want in. So you get to make your choices of what you
So
fill
what
it.
makes it Jewish? It's empty.
It's being
What is it?
used by the Jewish people. Look, eating bagels can be a Jewish activity and a not Jewish activity.
What makes it Jewish?
If a not Jewish person walks into a bagel shop because it's the closest place available and gets a ham and cheese bagel, it doesn't have to be Jewish if it came from a Jewish background. But if a Jewish person says, I remember my grandmother having warm bagels and lox at her house on Shabbat mornings or on Sunday afternoons and singing Yiddish songs to me, and so when I have bagels it brings me back to that moment, then that is a Jewish experience. Eating Chinese food is not Jewish, except on December 25th, and then it is Jewish. So the same experience can be Jewish and not Jewish depending on the person doing it. So what makes these things Jewish is who's doing it, and when, and why, and how, and what's the impact on them. So it's going to be different for different people. Carrying a Torah scroll, if you're an archivist, and someone found this object, or an archaeologist, and you dug it up and found it, it's going to be different than doing it in a synagogue, or doing it as a bar mitzvah student. So the time and the place is going to make it different. It has more chance of being Jewish if it comes out of the Jewish historical experience, if it reflects Jewish values, if it's in a Jewish language, if it's in a Jewish community. But in the end, there's again, I hate to make things undefined, but sometimes that's reality. There's no one hard rule that's going to say this is Jewish and this is not Jewish, and it's always going to be that way. Honestly, eating a ham and cheese sandwich on matzah during Passover, when you know it, is Jewish in a way, and not Jewish. You're doing it, the phrase in Yiddish is avsalachas. I'm doing it just to make someone mad. I'm doing it davka, exactly on Passover, just to push back. So there's a sort of counter-programming that is also Jewish in a way. So again, there's no hard line, yes or no. It's a very different way to approach it. People will define, you said yourself at the end of our session in the morning, that sometimes I feel like a bad Jew. And I would say there's no such thing as a bad Jew, and you shouldn't define yourself that way because that's saying I'm bad at being what I am. If Jewishness is what you are, then you can deepen that, you can widen that, you can train that, but you are that, and it shouldn't admit of that kind of qualitative good, bad.
But what's the R-ness that I was born that because I have Jewish parents? Or because
It's a lot of
Yeah,
that.
I think it's what's, I think
what?
it's what's, I eat bagels, what?
Yes, and or altogether. I mean, for some people it's birth, for some people it's genetics, You know, I had someone just join an online Facebook group I'm a facilitator for on humanistic Judaism. He said, I got back 1% Jewish DNA, so I guess I'm part of you guys.
But you know, because, but
Oh.
here's
Hey,
a
okay.
rabbi saying this, if you were an Orthodox rabbi.
My life would be very different.
And you would be saying, answering this question very differently.
Yes, that's right. Why should Jews answer every question the same way? 2 Jews, 3 opinions, 2 rabbis, 4 answers.
And I think there's this tendency to say there's the right kind of Jew and the wrong kind of Jew, and that's the problem, is that there isn't the right or the wrong, there's whatever you find meaningful. So if I'm with people who are more secular in their orientation, that's meaningful for them. But if I'm then talking to somebody who's conservative, who feels that they have to follow a halakha a certain way, and that's meaningful for them, that's fine, that's okay. We're both Jewish. They're experiencing their Judaism in the way that makes it meaningful. And that's what we say in our movement is, you don't even have to be born Jewish. If you identify with the experience of Judaism and you identify with the Jewish people and you support them, then you're considered to be a member of the tribe.
Join the family. So this story appears at the beginning of Elie Wiesel's novel, Gates of the Forest. In the first generation, when there was a crisis threatening the Jewish community, the rabbi of the town would go out into the woods to a special spot, would build a special fire, and he would say a special prayer, and the crisis would be averted. In the next generation, the rabbi would go out to the special spot and say the special prayer, but he had forgotten how to build the special fire. But it was still sufficient, and the crisis was averted. The next generation, the rabbi did not know the spot in the forest, did not know how to build the fire, but he could say the special prayer, and that was enough, and the crisis was averted. The last generation, the rabbi did not know the special prayer, he did not know where to make the fire, and did not know the spot in the forest, but he could tell the story. Is that sufficient? That question of, is it diluted, is it enough, does the future hold? In the end, Jewish in the 21st century is asking that question, is telling the story enough? Or maybe we need to make our own fire, find our own special place, and do it in a way that works for us.